You let me know when you would like me to start, okay?
Hi, Venerable. Maybe another minute or so. I think there are still some participants coming in.
Yep.
Venerable, I think we can start anytime. We are ready.
Okay. We're right on time this week. So, good morning, Singapore, ABC. Nice to see you again. I can see Sweet Kim's face there. A lot of you are not on, well, I don't see all the little windows. So we're continuing on our exploration of the glance meditation at the end of the Guru Puja, which is a summary of the Lamrim, which is a great daily practice. Whatever you do, say you just did the 6-session yoga, if you did do that, say, and then you could do the glance meditation on the Lamrim afterwards, just to make a sort of complete practice. Or you could just take, you could do the whole Guru Puja, or you could with the Lamrim meditation at the end, or you could do the Ganden Lagama, the request to Lama Tsongkhapa from Tushita with the Lamrim meditation at the end, or just take refuge and generate bodhicitta and meditate on the glance meditation. It's a great way to keep in mind all of the elements of the path, where you are, where you're going, where you've been, so to speak. As I mentioned several times, one of my teachers, Geshe Repton, used to say that one of his only regrets of this lifetime was that there were some days when he didn't have time to meditate on the Lamrim. Wow, just amazing, That's the real, that's the real nectar that can, when your mind is turbulent, that can help to, by going through all of those meditations, you feel afterwards, oh, everything's okay, he has the whole path in there. Yeah. So just as a quick review, we talked about the first verse of the importance of having a spiritual guide and properly depending upon them, relying upon them, and making prayers that, having made offerings and requests to them, that in our future lives that we will be guided by them. I remember Lama Yeshe saying sometime, maybe it was Venerable Sanghi Khandro, who's teaching you now, I think, on the Lojong, that, or maybe she herself said she remembered, like she had a feeling that she'd prayed in previous lives to be connected, to always be protected by a spiritual guide. So this is one of the special causes, praying for that. That was the first verse. And then a verse that combines the meditations on the life of leisure and endowment and impermanence, the second verse, Lenchik Samchik. And I find very interesting, as you go through all of them, when you go back to that verse, say, about the value of this perfect human rebirth, how to make it meaningful, there are many meanings that come up in the succeeding verses, such as, wow, I could develop compassion this lifetime, heartwarming love, affectionate love for other sentient beings. I could develop, the sense of equalizing and exchanging myself with others. Bodhicitta, the perfections of, generosity and morality and patience and enthusiastic perseverance, concentration, wisdom, the tantric realizations. As you go through all of those, they can be applied again the next day when you meditate on the perfect human rebirth. Think, wow, what I'm missing, by wasting my time in samsaric things. So that can be very powerful. They all interact with one another. They all reaffirm one another, all of the meditations. Then the third verse on meditating on the suffering of the lower realms, recognizing the great suffering that we ourselves and others are experiencing, and taking refuge as a protection against that. Then 2 verses on renunciation of all of samsara. One of them is talking about Leidan Nyomong, buffeted by the waves and whirlpools of karma and delusion, and afflicted by the sufferings, afflicted by the 3 kinds of suffering, the watery denizen of the 3 kinds of suffering, to develop a firm wish to be free from samsara. In which case you can meditate, at which point you can meditate on the 4 Noble Truths and the 12 links of dependent origination to get a feeling of the expansiveness of the suffering. That's so important as a foundation for developing bodhicitta, because without understanding our own plight within cyclic existence, without seeing all of the samsaric pleasures as trivial and the extensiveness of suffering, there's no way that we can really feel compassion for others. Those that are wealthy or in power, temporarily, it might be, without understanding that nature of samsara, we might not feel compassion for them. We'd only feel compassion for those that are in worse straits than we are, the beggars on the street or something like that. And then that verse was talking of using the analogy of the samsara like a vast ocean within which we're struggling and fearful of the monsters, the sharks and other kinds of sea creatures, dragons. And then the next verse using the analogy of samsara as like a prison, and to recognize that what we generally think of samsara as having some potential of being like a pleasure garden. Everything we get our, what's it famous in Singapore? It used to be 4 or 5 C's, a credit card, country club, I can't remember. You used to have some expression. I'm not sure if they still use that. Maybe now it's V's for vaccine and something else, I don't know. But to recognize that samsara is not a pleasure garden, that all of this, all of the samsaric appearances that we have in this lifetime of the nature of suffering. And as a result of reaffirming that, to see all of samsara like that, to develop the wish to practice the 3 higher trainings: ethics, morality, concentration, single-pointed concentration, and the wisdom that understands the ultimate nature of oneself and all phenomena, the emptiness of self and emptiness of phenomena, higher wisdom. That's what the Theravada path, the Hinayana path, the hearers and solitary realizers who are aiming to find nirvana, liberation, that's what they have to use. That's like their perfections. That's what they have to practice in order to escape from samsara. So those are very important as a beginning. I remember once at Kopan, many many, many years ago in the early days when I was there, some Khargyu Lama, I think it was Kalu Rinpoche, great Khargyu Lama, used to send his disciples to Gelugpa centers, especially to Kopan, because the Gelugpas had he felt had a very good presentation of these fundamentals that were necessary, to turn the mind toward the Dharma, meaning all of those meditations we just talked about. So then we talked about the beginning verses of the person who's a person of higher scope in the Mahayana. First of all, that recognizing that all of these migrators, that are tormented uncontrollably, nyamtak joa dikun dagima, all of these unfortunate migrators who have been my mother and treated me in kindness, raised me in kindness, again and again, numberless lives, to develop a heartfelt affection for them and spontaneous, effortless compassion, non-contrived compassion for them. So this is talking especially about the seven-fold cause and effect, the 6 causes and 1 effect. You know what they are? Recognizing all sentient beings have been our mother, remembering their kindness when they've been mother, repaying their kindness, which is implicit in here, developing affectionate love, which is not full-fledged love, but a sense of warmth when we see sentient beings. Ah, mother. Like Atisha used to look at the cows out the window and could be heard murmuring, mother. Recognizing all sentient beings, even the most despicable people or things that you find frightening, they've all been your mother sometime when they had a different bodily form. And then great compassion, which is the final part of that verse, effortless compassion, leaving out the final 2 elements of universal responsibility or higher responsibility, laksam, and the actual development of bodhicitta. Then the next verse we talked about was integrating into this sequence of developing bodhicitta, equalizing oneself and others. So what was it? Dugnatamo samyam midoshin, not, sentient beings dugnatamo samyam midoshin, not desiring even the smallest suffering, not anticipating that, wanting to be free of that, and wanting to have happiness, but never finding satisfaction with happiness. We're all the same in that. We're all equal. We're equal to all sentient beings, and that reason alone, although there are other ways you can equalize oneself and others, on the basis of that to develop a sense of great love, maha maitre, champa champo, being happy rejoicing in the happiness of others. And I mentioned just in passing there, you can investigate whether that kind of rejoicing is a 7-limb rejoicing, or whether it's not, whether it's rejoicing, but not 7-limb rejoicing. Rejoicing usually means, in the 7 limbs, usually means rejoicing in the virtuous actions of others. How wonderful it is that they've created those actions, maybe that have given rise to these happinesses, but just feeling happy about the happiness of others without recognizing the causal connection to them is more properly categorized, in my opinion, as great love. In fact, if you look in the Lamrim teachings, none that I've ever seen, other than oral teachings of some lamas who like to put them together, usually rejoicing of the 7 limbs only talks about rejoicing in the virtuous actions of others. And of course, oneself, rejoicing in one's own virtuous actions. and thereby creating virtuous karma as a result of that. But rejoicing in the happiness of others, although it creates virtuous karma, it's not the same as the seven limb rejoicing. So then after, the first verse about remembering mothers, having been kind, then equalizing ourselves and others and developing a great love for them, then recognizing the defects of the self-cherishing thought. This chronic disease of self-cherishing. It's seeing that as the cause that gives rise to all undesired suffering. And so that's the thing that we put the blame on, and we hold strong resentment toward it. That's the thing that we should feel resentment toward, not politicians. In America, there might be some people who resent the present president, or other people on the other side of the spectrum who resent the previous president or something like that. Whatever we experience, the root cause of all of our suffering is a self-cherishing thought. And so as a result of that, to feel resentment toward that, and then to develop the understanding the defects of the self-cherishing thought, to want to destroy it, and its root cause, which is the self-grasping. So the very last line doesn't use the word self-cherishing any longer. It says, help me to defeat, grant me blessings to defeat the great demon of self-grasping. So the medical sense of that the demon of self-grasping creates the chronic disease. If you can eventually get rid of the demon, there won't be any chronic diseases. Then the verse that I particularly, it particularly inspires me, the verse of, the mind that would hold, that cherishes sentient beings and would set them in bliss, is seeing that as the doorway, the entryway to the arisal of infinite qualities. So seeing that, even if all sentient beings were to arise as our enemy, to cherish them more than our own life. So that's the verse just before this was the defects of the self-cherishing thought. Now the benefits of cherishing others. And then a condensation. The next verse we talked about, I think last time, Dorna Chiparang Gunadang. So in short, or in summary, a couple of verses in the Lama Chopa begin with Dorna. Dorduna, or Dorna means in short or in summary. Chipa means infantile beings, childish beings. We childish beings work only for ourselves, whereas the Munindras, the Tubwang, that's an epithet of the Buddhas. The Buddhas work only for the welfare of others. So as Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, no need to say a lot. All these logical reasons, just look. Ordinary beings who work only for themselves, they have all suffering. They never get, they might find some success this lifetime because of the ripening of virtuous karma from previous lifetimes, but never brings ultimate satisfaction, doesn't last, has to be left behind. And in the future lives, using up their good karma, again, circling within cyclic existence most of the time in the lower realms. So as a result of recognizing that, to develop a wish to equalize, to equalize ourselves and others. I seek your blessings to enable me to equalize and exchange myself with others. So seeing the defects of the self-cherishing thought and the benefits of cherishing others like that. So this one in the when I talked about this special teaching that Serkon Rinpoche had given once, that was handed down from the Kadampa Lamas, especially famous with Trijang Rinpoche's teachings. His Holiness the Dalai Lama mentioned sometime in his commentaries of the Lama Chopa and other places how he had received it from Trijang Rinpoche. One of the decisions is here that I am capable, just as the Buddha was an ordinary being once, was at the beginning of his, quest toward enlightenment, which began numberless lifetimes ago, of course. But even just when he was still beginning, he was an ordinary being and worked mainly for his own aim. But eventually, because we have the Buddha nature within us, he had the Buddha nature, we have the Buddha nature, he was able to work for the welfare of others. So we should be inspired to be able to do the same thing. I seek your blessings to enable me to exchange myself with others with the attitude that understands the distinctions between the faults of the self-cherishing thought, the ordinary beings, chipa, infantile beings. They end up never succeeding to find real happiness, and the advantages or the benefits, the qualities of those who work for others, such as the Munindra, the Buddha. So then, also last time we talked about the next verse, which then goes further, right? Move it up a little, there you go. So I mentioned that this verse doesn't have all of the words in the last line. It actually should say, hence I seek your blessings to make you could say core practice, the heart of my practice, the yoga, Neljor, of exchanging self and others. Oh, it does have that. I seek your blessings to make my core practice the yoga of exchanging self and others. For some reason I was thinking, the copy I have from the retreat book just says, hence I seek your blessings to enable me to equalize myself and others. I'm reading, so I had another copy that's on my iPad here from the FPMT prayer book. And that must have been an earlier version of it that's been corrected, fortunately. So I had mentioned that last time. So here in that situation, getting closer to developing the practice of exchanging self and others. Going back in one's mind again and again, the cherishing myself brings all, is a doorway of all misfortune. Gupa, here it says loss, doesn't just mean loss, everything that's not good. And while cherishing my mother's is the foundation of all good qualities, Yundan, Dechir, therefore, I seek your blessings to make the yoga of exchanging self and others the heart of my practice, the heart of practice. So as I mentioned before, last time also, you'll find in various teachings, like for instance, the Satipatthana Sutra in the Theravada, the Vipassana Sutra, that this is the essence of the path. But it doesn't mean that that's the essence at a certain point in your practice. The same way that the Christians say, Christ said, I am the way and the light. Other than me, there's no way to the Father, something like that. it doesn't, none of these are contradictory. There are certain points in our practice where a certain practice is our heart practice. I remember when, I might have mentioned this before, I can't remember, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when Khyentse Song Rinpoche first taught Chu, you know, the practice of severing Chu, where you have this big Damaru drum and a thigh bone trumpet, and you imagine being in the, either imagine or actually go to the charnel ground cemetery and call upon all the spirits to feast upon your body in such a situation, to give rise to self-cherishing and self-grasping becomes so obvious. And so in that situation, you can sever that. You can cut that because of that particular practice. That is to say, you can make the objective negation of self-grasping. You know, you can make the self-grasping so obvious and see very clearly what is to be abandoned. And in going through with that kind of practice, you can, it's a way of enhancing your ability to sever that. Chu means to cut or sever. Choba, chu. So when Lama Zopa was first introduced to that, I think it was about the same time that we received empowerment from Song Rinpoche, Lama Zopa was practicing all the time. That was like his heart practice for some time. It seemed like, you know, to us. And I remember Lama Yeshe sort of guiding him and saying, you know, you could only practice Chu. So you could only practice Chu, you know, 4 hours a day or a certain number of hours a day or something like this, because he would have been practicing all the time. So obviously needing other things. Not necessarily that there was any fault in Lama Zopa's part, maybe the guru always acting as the object of our learning. You know, Lama Yeshe could point out some fault in supposed fault in Lama Zopa that Lama Zopa was taking to show us how we should practice. So there is a point, you know, to practice this. And so in developing bodhicitta, this is a point when you want to take the exchange of self and others as your heart practice for some time. As Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, put yourself in the shoes of the other person. Look back at yourself and criticize yourself for not giving or not helping or whatever. So this is a point where you might go and check the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, those teachings and other teachings you've received. So then I think we also introduced the next verse after the 8 verses of training the mind. Oh, yeah, it even has in this text, it even has prayer from Chu, thought transformation prayer from the Buddha's previous lives from Chu. So then this famous verse, Dana Jesun Lama Tukche Chen, Margyur Droe Digdib Jugnil Kun, Malu Tanda Dagla Minpadan, Dagi Dege Shenla Tanwayi Drokun Den Dedan Dempa Jingilop. So this has 5 lines, as I mentioned. One of the disciples of the 4th Panchen Lama, of Losang Chogi Gelsen, his name was Tapukpa Losang Namcho Gelsen. He requested the Panchen Lama. He said there's 4 lines starting with Margyur Droe Digdeb Dugnilkun. Is so important. This is sort of like first now putting together the Tonglen in one practice. It's so important to add this extra line of supplication to the Guru, and thus perfect, pure, compassionate Gurus. Jesun Lama Tukche Chen. Grant me the blessings. So this one, even in the original version, I don't think it ever said to recite 3 times. So, but the tradition is to add this extra line to make 5, and to recite that, contemplate on that 3 times as it's so important. So here, I wanted to elaborate a little bit more about that. So Muntu Dharmabhadra's commentary says, how to practice this, how to do this practice. He says, first of all, imagine, visualize, if you want, around you all sentient beings as before. So as before means as we did the equanimity meditation or meditation on love and so forth, you imagine all sentient beings around you in various ways. I'm sure you've heard before, So different ways to do. Sometimes you put the pleasant people in front and your enemies behind. Sometimes you put your enemies in front and relatives and friends and loved ones behind, and then strangers and all sentient beings. Anyway, all sentient beings around you. And then all of their karmic causes, which are the negativities, and the karmic results of suffering that they have, you imagine, you make a request. May they ripen on me, all of those ripen on me now. This is kind of explaining when it says, I seek your blessings that all negativities, obscurations, and sufferings of mother migrators may without exception ripen on me right now. So you imagine that all of the sentient beings at their hearts, these negativities and obscurations. So what does that mean? Negativities means the karmic seeds that they've created that are still on their mind stream. And the obscurations means the karmic obscurations and the obscurations to omniscience. So the karmic seeds themselves just mean the potential to give suffering, and their very presence becomes an obstacle to liberation. And the imprints of grasping to the self and so forth are the obscurations, besides, and other things, obscurations to omniscience. So all of these obscurations and the negativities, karma and obscurations, and the sufferings that they are presently experiencing, all of them ripen on, may they ripen on me right now. So the way you do that is you, at the hearts of all of them, these negativities and obscurations and sufferings, imagine them in the aspect of black light, and at their hearts, and imagine that black light comes to you in the form of dark smoke, blackness coming to you, drawing by your volition to experience these sufferings out of compassion for them, and again out of recognizing the advantage of this, cherishing them more than myself, that I might suffer for them. Imagine that comes to oneself, into one's own heart, where the self-grasping, dagzin, the essence, the entity of that is in the aspect of a lamp. So the way I understand this is that the self-grasping ignorance is actually a diluted wisdom, is actually the Tibetan word sherab, or prajna, like we talk about prajna paramita, the perfection of wisdom. All wisdom is not the perfection of wisdom. All wisdom is not always beneficial. There's some people who are very clever and have wisdom to hurt others or just to accumulate things for oneself, being clever and so forth. That's still called wisdom. And so the dagzin, the self-grasping, is actually a misdirected wisdom. It's perceiving the appearance of a self-existent, inherently existent self, and believing that. So that, to my mind, is what's meant in Multu Dharmabhadra's commentary, that at one's own heart, the self-grasping is in the aspect of a lamp that is then, as this black smoke, like suffering and obscurations of sentient beings, is drawn to oneself, it begins to cover one's own self-grasping, and it takes on the aspect of being dark black. Then you imagine that the happiness and virtues, dege, of oneself that has been collected in the 3 times. So the virtuous karma that you've collected in the past, still in your mind stream, the present that you're collecting, and even that in the future, which you have not yet collected but will collect. Kind of this is, and that virtue and happiness that you will experience, this is in the form of aspiration. I will give all of that, not just what I collected in the past and what I have now, but even in the future, to offer that to sentient beings, the tongwa, the giving. And that leaves you in the form of white light, and then that begins to go and cover all sentient beings, and they are imagine that they are endowed with perfect happiness, and say all of the necessities for their practice because of your virtues. They have jobs, they have friends, they have housing, they have warmth, they have food, everything that they need, and they have the causes of happiness. And as a result of that, they develop the path and achieve enlightenment. And then the text mentioned, as I think I mentioned last time, that if you go into detail, that you should not imagine taking on the sufferings or obscurations of your guru, because they are actually Buddhas, from the point of view of guru devotion. So if your lama, your teacher, exhibits suffering, like they're sick, or they, something is preventing them from coming back to Singapore, like Ken Rinpoche, imagine that this is a result of the karmic obscurations of their disciples, you included. And so you imagine taking on those sufferings. That's the way you would practice with respect to your guru. You wouldn't take on the suffering of the guru, but the obscurations and negative karma of the disciples that create this impure view of some obstacle to the guru appearing, passing away. So imagine taking that on. So then, other than that, all other sentient beings, such as the bodhisattvas, the hearers, solitary realizers, all of their, even, let's say if you're talking about arhats and bodhisattvas who are Arya bodhisattvas, taking on their final obscurations to deluded obscurations, their delusions, their karma, and their subtle obscurations of omniscience. Imagine all of that, starting from that subtlest thing that the 10th level bodhisattvas still have, all the way down to all of the sufferings of hell. All of that, take that upon oneself. You might think there's not much you can give to them, but some of your virtuous karma can put them over, over the top, let's say. Then the text mentions, as you probably heard before, for beginners like ourself, this is a very useful, this is Lempe Gorim Le Dambobo. So the ones who are taking on the beginners in this, they should begin with taking our own suffering of the afternoon. Say if you do your meditation in the morning, imagine taking on your own suffering of the afternoon now, whatever kind of irritations might arise. Like if you do your meditation in the morning, imagine the irritation that you have taking the, is it the MRT? I can't remember in Singapore, or the road rage or whatever. Imagine experiencing that now, so you don't have to experience your own suffering later. So you begin with your own suffering, rather than why should I take on other people's suffering? Just imagine taking on your own suffering. Then the suffering of yourself, of tomorrow, of the next 10 days, the next month, the next year, the suffering of your time of death. Imagine that, taking that now so you don't have to suffer it later. Maybe you can be encouraged. Does that make sense? Yeah. That might say, oh, if I experience it now, when I have some strength of mind, I won't have to experience it later. And then the suffering of future lives. Kewa chimala soba. That which is to be experienced, all of that suffering, take that on. That's definitely, as we're still in samsara, that's definitely going to be experienced. Then when you're familiar with that, taking on your own suffering, imagine the suffering of your mother and father, your parents, your friends, your brothers and sisters, your friends, your loved ones, taking that on. As you familiarize with taking your own suffering first. Then take on the suffering of Dharma, the strangers, you might say, people that are neither friends nor enemies. And then finally, if you've been successful in those meditations, going sequentially like this, serially, you can take on the suffering of your enemies and all sentient beings. So a very skillful way to start from, maybe in the course of a year, just first imagine taking on your own sufferings of later in the day, the next week, all of this life, future lives, essentially. And then the sufferings of your loved ones, your parents, your brothers and sisters, and so forth, and strangers and enemies. So when giving, Tongwe say, begin with such things as, like Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, said the Bhagavan first taught us to give vegetables and so forth until eventually we could give our own body. So it's not right at the beginning to actually give your own body for others, although you might be if you can give your liver or your kidney or something like that for those in need, you can do now with a strong mind. But not to just let yourself be eaten by others right now. You need this body, but you first begin to erode the self-cherishing, to give simple things like vegetables, cooked vegetables, and things to eat and drink, starting from small things, and successively giving all the good things that you can think of eventually, at the end, giving one's own body and one's life energy to give to others. So this might take a very strong, you at first you might think the giving sounds easy because easier than taking on suffering, but actually giving your own body and life for others, your loved ones. In the Jataka tales, sometimes one of the verses, one of the stories in the life stories of the previous lives of the Buddha when he was practicing the Bodhisattva path, that people find difficulty with is when he had a wife and children, and someone asked for his wife and children, so he gave them. You might think, oh, that's weird. You might think that's not right. What about their suffering and so forth? Of course, even giving all of these things you're attached to, all of these have to be dealt with, with wisdom and understanding when you reach very high levels of the path, to have no attachments whatsoever. In the verse that we'll get to in a couple of weeks on the perfection of giving, so it is to grant me blessings to give without any attachment whatsoever, to enhance that mind of giving. So that's the giving. Tongbe say, start with the small things, giving up till one's own body. And then in his commentary, he mentions a verse from Shantideva, Bodhisattva Charyavatara. I think it is, my notation here says, it's chapter 6, verse 14, first two lines. Gomna lawa migyowe ngode kangyang yomayin. Essentially means there is nothing which does not become easier through familiarity. Or in other words, if you familiarize yourself with something again and again, there is nothing that remains difficult. Eventually, everything will become easy. So familiarizing yourself with this meditation, Tonglen, you will be able to do it eventually. We have the capacity. I mentioned also Kirti Senchab Rinpoche. I'm not sure if many or any of you know the great Lama who was one of the gurus of the Dalai Lama. He taught him especially some of the lineages of the Kala Chakra and other things. He had some lineages that the Dalai Lama didn't have. And he was a guru of Lama Zopa Rinpoche besides our Western students. Great Lama who sort of had this particular practice of lojong, always happy. Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to say, always smiling, always happy, nothing disturbed him. When he was getting very old, he was diagnosed with, I think it was liver cancer, maybe some of you know. And I remember some of the advice he gave, translated by one of his Western students who we know, Greek girl translator. I can't remember her name. I can't remember. She translated the teachings that he gave on Tantra, that book. And he said, through her, all my life I've been practicing Tonglen, familiarizing with this, just imagining taking on suffering of others. Now I'm able, as my liver is failing and I'm suffering and I'm experiencing these obstacles, I can imagine it more lucidly, more, the suffering is, I can imagine taking on their suffering and I'm experiencing it. So this is familiarizing ourselves with this meditation on Tonglen will provide us with the ability when things are very bad for us, when great suffering comes, that we'll be able to utilize that. And that will come in the next verse also a little bit. So there's nothing that doesn't become easier through familiarity. And then he says, when meditating on Tonglen, you should recite the prayers of the power of truth. You know what the power of truth is? By the truth, there are many verses like this that you say, we say some when we dedicate, when we imagine the multiplication of offerings, you know, due to the power of the blessings of the Buddhas, the Dharma Dhatu, and so forth, by the truth of this and that, may these things take place. So, Dagi Sampa, Sampe Topdag Dang. It just gives the first verse of that, which goes also, so by the power of means the power of the truth of my own aspirations, my own thoughts, by the power of the generosity of the Dejin Shekpa, the Tathagatas. Sometimes some people say it should be translated as the blessings, but here it says Dejin Shekpe Jintop. Jin here is spelled like giving, not the jin of Jinlab in blessing. So I remember Gendan Rinpa, I mentioned before, I think, how he explained this, the Buddha Shakyamuni dedicated his merits that his disciples would never be bereft of food and utilities. When Gendan Rinpa was meditating in isolation in McLeodganj, near the stupa of Trijang Rinpoche, maybe some of you know, he had a little hut there. He meditated for many, many years. And one winter when he was almost out of food and it was snowing outside, he couldn't get down, and he thought, okay, I'm not going to leave. I'm just going to, even if I have to die, I'm going to meditate here. And as soon as he thought that, he told me, he said, he heard some voice outside, some lay people had brought a big thing of butter, Tibetan butter, you know how they cover it in leather, and meat and tea and other things. And he attributed that to the Buddha's generosity in previous lives, all of the things that he had given that is dedicated for sentient beings. So that second line can be due to the truth of the power of the generation, the generosity of the Tathagatas, or the blessings of the Tathagatas, by the Chuki Yingi Topnamgi, by the truth of the power of the Dharma Dhatu, the emptiness of all phenomena, and the practices of the Aryas and so forth. May all of these things that I've contemplated come true. So you'll probably find in your prayer book some of prayers like this of the power of the truth. So you can finish your practice when you meditate on the Tonglen like that. So to give you, all of this has just been imagination, but imagining that due to the power of the truth of the Dharma and the blessings and so forth, the generosity of the Buddha, may all of these things come about in a reality. And then to finish, to meditate on, to dedicate the merits, it says, Dene, Komcha gomche la sokpe, chutamche rangshin gidrupa mepe, ngeshe drangne. So inducing a ascertaining consciousness, a wisdom consciousness that understands the non-inherent existence of that which is meditated on and the meditator, so, oneself, I myself do not inherently exist. The processes that I've imagined here, the objects of meditation, None of them are inherently existent. Having developed that to then, as much as you can, to arise in a state of bliss and emptiness. So the context here, we usually, in the sutras tradition, we don't talk about so much bliss and emptiness. It's a term that comes in the tantric tradition. But here he's saying from that state you arise as Vajrabhairava, Yamantaka. And you try to develop a pure view. So those of you who are familiar with those tantric terms can embellish it with that, or just to meditate, to dedicate the merits at the end of the, as we've dedicated the last time, in the emptiness of the three spheres. Let me take a sip here. So that's the famous verse that we recite 3 times on Tonglen. So this verse does not talk about about utilizing the breathing, breathing in the suffering. And so this is all done just imagining the suffering coming to you and then sending out your good qualities, all in the form of light and so forth. Okay, so then the next verse begins a new outline here. It's in Guru Dharmabhadra's commentary. It says Sumba, the third category, and this is Lojongi Dongsen Lakma Temba Lasum. So showing the remaining divisions or demarcations of the training of the mind. So those of you who are studying with Venerable Sankhya Khandro, you may have reached these already or will be reaching them. So the first one is the Sampe Kennen Lamdu Gyurtsu, the way to transform adverse conditions into the path in thought, through thought, by thought. So this is a famous verse here. Nutra Digbe Debu Yongkang Te, Midu Dugnal Chartar Bab Yurkyang, Lenen Debu Zepe Gyurtong Ne, Kenyan Lamdu Longbar Jingilo. Even Nutra Digbe Yongkang Te, Midu Dugna. The kyang at the end of the second line is sort of even, although, or even if the environment, the nu means the vessel world, and the inhabitants therein, the chu means vessel and contents. So you might say, like you think of the cup as a nuba, vessel, and the yogurt you put in, or the tea, or the Chinese tea, or whatever you put in, is the chu, essence. So the same word is in chulen, when taking the essence, the flower essence that's made for the yogis and yoginis when they meditate. So when the nurchu, the vessel world, or the vessel, the environment, in other words, and the inhabitants therein are filled with the results of negativity. So that means bad things are happening because negative karma is ripening. And midu dugnal, undesired suffering, chartara, like rain, falls like rain. So that's maybe a little bit like what we're experiencing now, no? This epidemic, COVID. If anyone watches this 20 years from now, they might think, oh, that they experienced the great epidemic of, when did it start? This is what, 2020? The great epidemic of 2020? Or I guess the COVID-19 means it started in 19, right? 2019. Undesired suffering falls like rain. Grant me blessings, or I seek your blessings, to take these adverse conditions. Ken in the last line means condition. Nyen means inferior, lower, bad. So bad conditions, adverse conditions, miserable conditions, to take them into the path by seeing them as causes to exhaust. Zepa means to exhaust the results of negative karma. So this is very profound, because this is now talking about how we can, one of the main obstacles of our successful practice is encountering adverse conditions. We don't have enough money, we have to leave retreat, or we can't get our visa to stay in India, or we're sick, or someone calls us to do something. All of these things we might think of as adverse conditions, and we imagine that they prevent us from practicing the path. But in the right way of thinking, one is able to utilize these adverse conditions to enhance your practice of the path. So the way that one does that, here it just gives a sort of a very simple word: by seeing them as causes to exhaust the results of my negative karma. So the way that one thinks about this is, one thinks about all of these conditions have arisen because of my negative karma of the past. And that by my experiencing them now with a mind that doesn't get angry or frustrated or create more negative karma, but actually recognizes as this is a situation where my negative karma is being reduced because it's ripening now. Like in the previous verse when we talked about imagining the suffering of the future and so forth, taking that on now, imagine the present suffering is actually reducing because of the present, your store of karma, negative karma, is reducing. So that means your future suffering will not be experienced. Obscurations of the future and so forth will be diminished by my experiencing that suffering now. There's a link to the meditation on Tonglen. Not necessarily at first the suffering of others, but then to extend that as you're experiencing that suffering. Like, say, for instance, many people, myself included, experience sort of frustration right now with the political situations in the United States, the suffering, the fear, and so forth. Kind of depression. I think Michelle Obama, the wife of the former president, Barack Obama, even mentioned how she felt she had some low-grade depression right now. So imagine you taking on the incredible fear and frustration and depression of others, in addition to, recognize that your own state of suffering right now, maybe feeling depressed or deprived, that this is reducing, this is exhausting your negative karma. But imagine in so doing, you're also doing Tonglen. You're taking on the suffering of everyone else and experiencing this. And that will enhance your purification. Not only will you be purifying your own negativity by not responding with depression, just experiencing that, it's just like experiencing being bitten by mosquitoes or something, or other kinds of suffering, being patient with that, not responding with anger or longing to be free immediately of that and so forth, but experiencing that and experiencing also the suffering of others. Imagine that you are taking on that so that others who are experiencing the same kind of depression or suffering that you're experiencing, they will be free of that by you being the gal or guy who's taking all of that on so that they can be free of that. So in this context, Mutu Dharmabhadra mentioned, so if you divide results, because we talked about here the results of negativity, right? The fruits, the word fruit here is debu, means also result, right? Result. So the results, if you divide results, there are 4 kinds of results. Remember, I think we talked about this last time. So there is an environmental result, the dakpo wangidebu or dakde. So that means I'll explain what it means in a second. So that's one. There's the maturation result of karma. In any karma that you create has these 4 results. There's the environmental result, dakpo debu, the maturation result, the result which is similar to the cause as an action, which is like the habitual result, and the result similar to the cause as an experience. Those are the 4. So first one, for instance, if you have committed murder or killing, for instance, the environmental result for the murderer or the killer, say oneself, is that one's own environment, one's own location, nebeyu, there will be a diminishment of the splendor of that place. So that might mean that the fruits will no longer in your own in your own environment. The fruits may not come on the trees. There will be a lack of water, or it becomes polluted, and maybe pollution in the air. Maybe also one of the results of all of the environmental results of all the 10 negativities is to have, diseases and so forth around you. So this is the environment. So that first result is when we talk about nurture, that's the environment. So that means your own environment, your own individual environment, or the environment that you share with other sentient beings also, which includes a greater distance. So your own environment might mean just your local, if you own land, the trees on your land or the water on your land or whatever become imperiled in some way. Then the maturation result is to be reborn in the lower realms. Here it gives the example of being born in hell, but that's usually any of the negativities that we create, the 10 non-virtues, they can give maturation result, if done in a very intense way, can be caused to be reborn in hell. And even murder or killing, if it's of a moderate, if it's moderated in some way, lessened in some way, we regret it, or it's of an insect or something like that, we may not be born in hell. The maturation result may be to be born as a hungry ghost or as an animal and so forth, but in the lower realms, that's the maturation result. The result of having killed, which is similar to the cause as an action, would mean to desire to kill again in future lives. Or maybe even in this lifetime, you get habituated in something and you leave an imprint in the mind, like a child. It's an example I've given sometime. Sometimes you see children sitting outside and babies, toddlers, and some of them are smashing insects with stones, and others would cry even to see any animal hurt at all, sort of like the habitual result of their actions of previous lives. So that's called a result similar to the cause as an action. And of all of the results, that is considered to be the most detrimental, because even when we experience, suffering of a bad environment or birth in the hell realms or other things, we create new negative karma by creating those negative actions again. So that is in some ways the result that's similar to the cause as an action is the most detrimental result. And it's for that reason we take vows, to try to prevent the continuity of creating negative actions. That's one of the greatest of the four opponent forces, that the force of restraining or promising, vowing, however you want to say it, not to create the action again. That has a particular purification of the effect similar to the cause as an action. I wish I could see your faces to see if it's making sense to you. But at the end, if there's questions, if you have questions, you can ask. I made some ginger and what's it called? Ginseng. Ginger and ginseng tea to drink. So my voice is beginning to go. Whoever gave me the ginseng last time I was there, I still have some little slivers in a bag. Very helpful. So, and then, and then the effect, the result that's similar to the cause is an experience in terms of killing, is to have a short life, to be killed, to have accidents and so forth. That is similar to the cause. You killed, and so the result similar to the cause as an experience is that you will be killed or have short lifespan or something like that. Short lifespan. So you imagine, when your own environment and the environment, collective environment that you share with other sentient beings because of collective karma is filled, and you yourself and other sentient beings are filled with the results of a negativity that you created in previous lives, collectively or individually. You can do both. You imagine, the suffering is falling like rain, like now. Imagine taking that on oneself with pleasure. Like the Kadampas always said, they preferred when bad things happened because they saw that as a diminishing of their negative karma, rather than when good things happening, because they saw that as a diminishing of their virtuous karma. So they would prefer to be criticized or to lose and so forth, because that meant that their negative karma was being eliminated, diminished, exhausted, as is said here. Okay. So in so doing, the independence on experiencing like that, the suffering now, the negative karma, that bad karma that you created in previous lives, that you collected in previous lives, will be exhausted. And in particular, if you experience the suffering of all sentient beings like that, imagine in the Tonglen sense that you are experiencing this for them, that is an exceptional way to practice this. Okay. So then I'll just introduce another verse here. The next one is Sechiki Nyamlendang Lojongi Tse. So this is the practice of one lifetime and the measure of having trained the mind. It's the two of the elements of the 7-point training of the mind that are here. So what does that mean, the practice of one lifetime? Practice of one lifetime, so this is what it is. Dorna Sangnen Nangwa Chishayang, Chukun Ningpo Togne, which is top. Well, it's a B at the end of T-O. This is T-O-P. I guess I'm not sure if that's FPMT way of writing that now or not. Top. No, the other in the retreat book it says top, T-O-B. Here it says T-O-P. Chukun Ningpo Top Nge Nyamlengi, by the practice of the 5 powers, the essence of all Chu, which means here doesn't mean just Dharma, all Dharma practices. In short, whatever arises, be it good or bad, Zangnian, Nangwa, Chishayang, whatever arises, by the power of by the practice of the 5 powers, or the 5 forces, the quintessence of the entire Dharma, or the all Dharma practices, I seek your blessings to transform them into a path enhancing the 2 bodhicittas. Jangchub Sem Ni, that Ni means 2, Pelway, enhancing or increasing the 2 bodhicittas, and thus to meditate only on mental happiness. So what this means is, I remember my first years at Kopan as a monk, and going down to the marketplace to buy vegetables. We say sabji. I don't think we had meat. I don't know if we ever ate meat, but you have peanut butter and vegetables and bread and everything, and butter and milk, and coming back either in a taxi or getting coolies to carry it up, and was, all sorts of hassles in the market and hardships along the way, but always feeling very happy, because giving the opportunity, everything that happens, whether it be good or bad, recognizing that as an opportunity to meditate on conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta, emptiness. So when bad things happen, recognizing this is the result of one's past negative karma, and feeling happy because of the fact that this is being, as in the previous verse, that this is being exhausted. When good things happen, recognizing that as the result of your past virtue that's being used up. And if you want to experience that kind of good thing again in the future, you have to practice the Dharma. So I'll give Muntu Dharma Bhadra's commentary here. That's more elaborate than this, but just to give an idea. So Dorna, in short, whatever arises, be it good or bad, by the practice of the 5 powers, the 5 forces, the essence of all Dharma practice. So what are those 5 forces? So I remember some of you may have gotten the big, thick book on Mahamudra that was written that I used a little bit when I taught Mahamudra last time in the class, just for a few people in my room. what's his name? I can't remember the author's name, but in there he has a translation of the Lama Chopa, but he thinks the five forces or something, or the five forces or something else. Here it means the Pempe top. Pempa means to impel or to throw. It's kind of like the force of momentum, making a very firm determination. So the force of determination. Karpo sabongitop, the force of the white seed. You've probably heard of these before. The force of sunjangitop. Sunjan means the force of making a firm determination to eliminate something. Sunjan means to pull from the root or to repudiate, the force of repudiation. I'll explain what that means in a minute. How many is that? 3. The force of familiarity, gompetop, and the force of prayer, monlamgitop. So what that means is this. Where are we? Yeah, here we go. Gompetop. So from now, to make a determination, from now, Dine, until I achieve enlightenment, until that, whatever life whatever days, years, months, meditation sessions, I will not fall under the influence of self-grasping, and will not of self-cherishing. Making a very firm determination like this. I will do like this.
Get that. Could you try again?
I pushed a button here that the Siri went on. How did it?
Get that. Could you try again?
How can I get rid of that? And my computer is trying to tell me I must have said something that sounded like to activate it or something, or pushed a button. I thought that was someone from ABC saying that. So this is the Pempetop, the force of determination. So it's kind of like a momentum, making a very firm determination from now until I achieve enlightenment. Every day, every year, every lifetime, every meditation session, I will not fall under the influence of self-grasping or self-cherishing. That's my main goal, to practice the 2 bodhicittas. So not falling under the influence of self-grasping means practicing ultimate bodhicitta, meditating on emptiness, having that wisdom so that you don't fall under the influence of self-grasping. And not falling under falling under the power of self-cherishing means practicing conventional bodhicitta. So the second power, that's the force, second force. The first force is the force of making determination like that, Pempetop. And the second one is called the force of familiarity. So to recall that again and again, familiarizing with that again and again, is the force of familiarity. So it's just like anything, like the previous verse I mentioned from Bodhisattva Charyavatara, there's nothing that doesn't become easier as you practice it, as you familiarize with it. So the force of familiarity means to do that again and again. So that's very important. It's common sense. That's why we practice meditation every day. That's why we do these practices again and again. It's not something that should get boring because you've done it before, but recognizing that you're doing it and familiarizing with it. So some of my prayers, because I've said so many times over the years, of course, nothing like the lamas who, are teachers and so forth, but it becomes easier because it's familiar. You can recall it. You can call it up in times of need, like these meditations on the Lamrim. If you familiarize with this glance meditation on the Lamrim that we've been talking about, when you really need it, you'll have it. You'll be able to practice it because you're familiar with it. So that's the force of familiarity. Second one. Gombe top. Then the force of the white seed. This is very nice. So as to not do not diminish the bodhicitta that we've already generated. That means the conventional or ultimate, and to increase it higher and higher, both the conventional and ultimate bodhicittas. So conventional bodhicitta means the wish to achieve enlightenment for the sake of others. And the ultimate bodhicitta means a wisdom of emptiness held by that mind, to make offerings, both actual and actually performed and mentally created. Somewhere it says in here, to the lamas and gurus, maybe that comes at the end of the sentence, to the assembled deities, such as the assembly of the merit field, to make actual and visualized offerings. So that's very important. Visualized offerings, we might think, I'm not going to make offerings because I haven't put anything on the altar. You can also just even recognizing, taking the effort to visualize offerings that are experienced by the omniscient mind. They experience the appearances that you visualize, and they experience everything in the state of great bliss and emptiness. If you have that understanding of the capability of the omniscient mind, you create merit simply by visualizing offerings. Of course, there's a difference between actually performing an offering, making food or flowers or incense or lamps and music and so forth. But even visualizing that creates virtuous karma. If you have the mind that understands the capability of the omniscient mind. I remember Geshe Zopa used to mention, this is something very, very profound. If you understand that point, the omniscient mind experiences your visualizations also. So, where was I coming? So to make those kinds of offerings to the merit field, when you see the fields, the harvest, dedicate that, offer that to the Buddhas. Beautiful gardens, naksel, green grass and meadows and flowers and so forth. So when Atisha went to Tibet, he would stop in his caravan, besides stopping for rest overnight. Sometimes they would stop, he'd take his stupa down and do confession to purify his vows. But other times he would look at the landscape and offer the valley, the beautiful, what was pleasant to see. And in Singapore, there's very beautiful places, the garden and everything, the harbor, and I'm not sure about downtown department stores. Maybe you can also offer that beauty to the Buddhas. But he would see the flowers and the fields. You can offer that to the Buddhas and dedicate it to the enhancement, so that the bodhicitta that you have developed does not diminish, and the bodhicitta that you are yet to develop have developed will increase higher and higher. Pure water, the Nida Gyukala Sopa, so the stars, the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellations, offer all of them, all of those things that are good, those that are owned and unowned, that means things that are common property that don't have an owner, and you can even offer things that are owned by others. You know, that doesn't mean that you take them and then bring them to the monastery and can put them before the statue where you'd be arrested by the owner of them. But just imagine that the Buddhas experienced them, the pleasure, the bliss and void that they experience, and dedicate that to these, you know, to the development of the two bodhicittas. This is called the Karpo Sabongito, the force of the white seed. So the white seed here means creating virtuous karma. And then the self-cherishing in one's own continuum and the self-grasping, both of these, since they are the principal enemies, self-cherishing and self-grasping, the force of the Sungjin Gitop, what is a repudiation, which destroys these, what do we say, inharmonious minds. That's the force of repudiation. So, not recognizing them as friends, recognizing them as enemies, and wishing to destroy them is the force of repudiation. And then the force of prayer means whatever virtuous practices that have been done to make prayers, aspirational prayers, that to develop and increase these two bodhicittas. So that's the five forces. So we're just running out of time. We're an hour and a half in, and I want to leave it a moment for questions and then dedication. We'll stop there and finish this verse next time, which is talking about the measure of the practice. You know, the measure of training the mind, which is always to have a happy mind. So, are there any questions? Maybe not, maybe a lot.
Please use the raise hand function if you have a question.
No one raising hand? You're probably all tired by now.
Good evening, Venerable.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to check with you, is that the five forces mentioned here, is it the same as the five power upon death? Is it the same?
So the names are the same, and that will come as the course has been extended a little bit, so we'll finish all the verses. It'll be several weeks. Near the end, when we talk about transference of consciousness, there's one verse, it talks about utilizing the instructions of one's guru, forcefully transferring the consciousness along with the five forces. So the same names, the force of determination, the force of the white seed, the force of familiarity, force of white seed, force of repudiation, and force of prayer, that comes there. But the meaning of it is a little bit different. So the force of the white seed, for instance, in that case, I won't go through all of them, but to say the force of the white seed would mean at that time to make offerings of all one's possessions to and so that you, for many purposes, so that you no longer are worried about losing the things as you're dying that you've accumulated this lifetime. So that even if your relatives come and they're arguing about who gets your Vajra and Bell, or who gets your estate, or who gets your credit card or whatever, you've already dedicated them. Usually the Kadampa Geshis would offer them to the Sangha, or let's say to the monastery, or to some, to make offerings to the poor, or charitable organizations and so forth. So the meaning of the names are the same, but the meanings are a little bit different then. So it's very important to familiarize with these now, and at the time of death. Like Lama Yeshe used to give this example. There was one monk who was on the point of death, and he wasn't able to do the transference of consciousness, maybe to Tushita he was trying to do. And his guru, with clairvoyance, saw that one of the hindrances was that he was still attached to the Tibetan tea in his bowl, his mug, his bowl in front of him. And so with psychic powers, the guru sort of talked to him and said, "There's better Tibetan tea in Tushita." And, then he was able to give up, renounce that, and was able to transfer his consciousness. So, it's the names are the same. And if you're studying with Venerable Sangikando, they do mention the same names in two places, at the time of death and at the time of the practice of this lifetime. Okay, but we'll talk about them at the time, applying them to the time of death, when that verse comes near the end of the prayer.
Can you just repeat about the power of prayer? The power of prayer, the last one.
Yeah.
Can you just repeat?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in your lifetime is to, let me just read you what it says here. Bunlam Gitop. So whatever virtuous practices are done, all of them, Jangshubgi Sem Keshing, Pelwe Gyurgyurchik, Yamdu Momba. So it means to aspire, to wish that, thinking that may all of these virtuous practices that were done, whatever I've done this lifetime, may it all go to generating and increasing the two bodhicittas. So it's in a way, all of the training of the mind, the essential point of all of the training of the mind is the practice of generating and enhancing the two bodhicittas. So what that means is conventional bodhicitta that we've been talking about, overcoming the self-cherishing thought, cherishing others, and eventually in the next verse, or two verses after this, we'll talk about the actual utilizing Tonglen on the breath to generate actual bodhicitta. So just cherishing others more than oneself is not bodhicitta, but actual bodhicitta. Go. So actual bodhicitta, there's some feedback there. Actual bodhicitta is actually developing the wish to achieve enlightenment out of compassion for sentient beings. So that's conventional bodhicitta. And ultimate bodhicitta is the realization of emptiness within a mind that has generated conventional bodhicitta. Okay. So someone else have a question? Yes.
请问你，如果你是继续朝着这个 Center of Excellence
Catherine, you may ask a question.
继续的话，那对你会带来什么影响呢？
Can you hear me, Venerable George?
Yes.
Okay.
Cat.
Yes. Venerable, I was just wondering, everything we do now is we have a factor of self-grasping. Even like taking refuge or accumulating merit, there's always a factor of self-grasping. So I would like to know, let's say, for example, even like going for refuge, it's out of fear that we go for refuge. Now, is this fear a affliction? Is it something we got to get rid of, this fear that we have?
Well, interesting. I remember Steve Batchelor, who is a Western practitioner, scholar, probably some of the author. He used to say it was interesting that if you look at the delusions, the 6 root delusions and the 20 secondary delusions, afflictions, and so forth, fear doesn't come anywhere. So fear can be positive or negative, right? A positive fear would be a wisdom fear that realizes fire can burn you. And so you don't stick your hand into a negative fear would be a debilitating fear that, I can't do anything, that causes you to not be able to act. So in taking refuge, the fear of suffering of the lower realms, concern, you could say, trepidation, anxiety, if I don't do something, I can be, if I don't purify my negative karma, if I continue acting in a negative way, I will experience this in the future. And the fear that arises from that can, first of all, arise from concern for oneself alone, which is a legitimate first initial way of taking refuge, may be based on self-grasping, but still legitimate. But a more profound way of taking refuge is to think that if I'm born in the lower realms, I can't continue practicing, so I won't be able to continue my Dharma practice to help others. Or even in further, if I am born in the lower realms, I won't be able to practice bodhicitta. I won't be able to, I'll lose my continuity of the path. So as self-grasping, and it's not only self-grasping, it's grasping to the self of phenomena. When we say self-grasping, usually we're talking about the grasping to the self of persons, but it can be grasping to a self of phenomena. When there's still an ignorance that grasps to the inherent existence of oneself and phenomena, that it's not the perfect way to practice, but one can still practice virtue on the basis of that. And in practicing virtue, taking refuge, say, even if it's based on grasping to fear of one's own self, as though it's inherently existent self, even out of that fear, one can create virtue because one relies upon the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, especially the Dharma, which can protect you from suffering. And that can get to elevate your understanding, to eliminate your ignorance, and elevate your wisdom and compassion to the point where eventually you can overcome self-grasping and self-cherishing. So it's a kind of a cumulative process. When we practice at the beginning, we might practice with a lot of self-cherishing and even we make offerings partially to impress others or to
Accumulate merit.
To get the approval of our gurus or friends. And so that's not pure karma, it's kind of striped karma mixed with self-interest. But as we practice in that way, our mind becomes calmer. And if we continue to practice and we're not we try to overcome the delusions, the self-grasping and the grasping to the self of phenomena. We make those practices more and more authentic. So it's not just like you can practice perfectly from the beginning. That's why we take refuge again and again. We don't necessarily take the refuge. We can take we take refuge again and again. When you take the pratimoksha vows, generally you're not supposed to take them again and again. You take them for the life. But refuge and bodhicitta, because they can degenerate and because it may not be authentic from the beginning, you can take those again and again. You take refuge again and again.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Venerable.
Yes. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.
Hi,
So,
Venerable. I think
yes.
it's probably getting late over there, so I suggest we stop here today.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your patience. We'll see you again next week, and we'll continue this journey through the Lamrim. Okay. Take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.